48-hour art check, round
Boom.
12. So one of the things that we've been trying to do with this is make sure we keep it to 15 minutes. And we just spent, I don't even know what time it is, forever talking about all this cool indie animation stuff. And at the end we said we should have been streaming that. So just know that a really interesting conversation just ended.
It's one of the things that we kind of anticipated going into this, which is why we put that like 15-minute limit on it, is we're both very long-winded and we like talking to each other. So it's like we could go forever. But what I didn't foresee is the fact that there's still the pre-recording phase where we're going to talk to each other for like an hour. All right, so should we jump into it?
Yeah, let's do it. I think I started last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did you get done in the last 2 days?
All right. I feel like I actually hit my goal, which is pretty cool. So you will see on the left, I finished inking that first panel, which was kind of a beast. And luckily, like during Artcasters, I ended up finishing the whole thing, which is kind of cool. One of the plus sides of doing like a weekly streaming show that's that long is you just end up getting a ton of art done. You've been on it, and like Cory, I think you've gotten like quite a lot done doing on those too. Just something about when you're kind of chatting and drawing, it kind of reminds me of art school, where you just kind of zone out and spend hours on like, you know, a gouache rendering or something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so then I managed to do the second panel, and I think that's exactly what I was aiming to do. The one goal that I haven't hit yet is the working out. So I'm going to try to do that before going to bed today.
Oh, no.
Today is the one day I missed working out so far. But yeah, it's kind of cool. And on a plus side, I talked a little bit about this in more detail like before we started recording, but a lot of the kind of crazy rush that was happening at work just sort of, my team just kind of stepped up, and so it's a little bit easier than I thought. I literally thought I was going to have to like, I thought I'd like be getting off work when we started recording this, and then probably working tomorrow. But like, I got out on time, so it's kind of it's been a good day, and I feel like I'm hitting my goals. But I do need to hit the working out today.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's great. That panel looks awesome. Having recently tried to do trees at a very similar angle, I'm like, I want to like study this more, because I like how you developed the form of that with the shadows, but they're not like, they've cast a shadow, but it's not like super dark. In the trees themselves. So you've got like 4 levels of like tonal value there in each of those trees, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think if you study it a little bit or look at it more closely, it's not that crazy what I was doing with it. Like, it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of quick brush strokes on the inside that are just like short tapered lines.
Yeah.
So it's like one really quick dip of the brush just multiple times, and then and just kind of almost using that like you would use I'm forgetting what the term is when you do a bunch like pointillism or something, but just with tapered lines, so they get a little closer together. But it's interesting that you say that, because I always feel like that's probably one of my weakest spots is trees. And so when I've been seeing the stuff you've been doing for the kids book, I've been like envious, because you're showing so much variety of texture, and using the brush in different ways to kind of get different types of wood and different types of looks to the trees. And I just, to me, I kind of want to study those more carefully. So
yeah, were you? Hey, Mike is in the chat. Hi, Mike. Where you say I have variety, I say that I have inconsistency and experimentation. So I'm still trying to. But yeah, no, that's good, and that's one of the things that I have been lacking, I think, in my artistic career, as short as it is being able to, because like that's one of the reasons why I buy like original art is I can like look at how different people handle different things, and it's super interesting. But that's like a finished done deal, and so it's interesting to see this like kind of intimately progress and watch, because I watched you put down like thumbnails and then roughs and then pencils and then all that stuff down to the inks, and so there's more that I'm getting out of watching you do this than I like studying these pages for specific things. So that's an interesting thing. Anyway, we are not going to hit our 15 minutes.
No, but you know what? It's okay. We're going to have occasional times where we go over a little bit.
Yeah.
So what did you how'd you do?
Yeah. So I am still struggling a lot with this page, and I kind of it doesn't seem like I've done a lot here. This is the one that was done before, and then I've been trying to work on different elements, and I'm showing 3 that are not, that I don't completely hate. but I had hoped to get this on the paper so that I could begin inking, and I haven't gotten to that point, which I'm okay with, because I think I can make it up. But I'm still trying to decide like where I want to go with this. I do want to do a surreal thing. I spent a considerable amount of time. I've got a couple Sergio Tapia books, and I spent a considerable amount of time going through his kind of his Arabian Nights collection, because that's very ethereal and dreamlike, and almost all the compositions are kind of this. And then I've got some Joelle Jones pages that I was looking at. I've just been like deconstructing and researching a lot to try to get a feel, because this is very, very different than what I normally am used to doing, and so like it's like bending my brain.
Yeah. So I think I mean, it definitely looks like you're trying something a little new with it, you know.
Yeah.
Are you thinking like of like when it does come to inking this? Are you thinking about like using dry brush with it, like for stuff like the bird?
Probably not dry brush. I don't hate other people's dry brush, but I hate my dry brush. I've never gotten to the point where I can do that. Like when Sean Crystal does dry brush, it just looks incredibly fluid and amazing, and when I do it, it looks like I ran out of ink. I just haven't gained the technical proficiency yet to be able to do that effectively.
It's really hard to, like, honestly, I can't say I have either. I just, like, for some reason, like, I think maybe because I was recently looking at Habibi by Craig Thompson.
Oh, that's such a good book.
Like the way he'll kind of dry brush like the edge of his line,
right?
But it's like controlled dry brush. It's not like overused. It's just like subtle.
Yeah.
I really would kill that skill, but for some reason I just envisioned that bird done in a line style like that. But that would be a beast. That's a really cool composition. So which one are you leaning towards? Did you kind of end up figuring out which one?
I don't know, to be honest. I do like this one, though it feels a little sparse, and I want it to feel a little bit more crowded. This one I worry about because I feel like it might be too abstract. I don't know if I've introduced the characters well enough to like abstract them that much, and so this is the one I'm talking about now. So probably this one is the closest, because I like the kind of Z formation pattern that I'm getting with the blacks and the whites. I like to kind of play with that background. I can't pause this.
Are you talking about the one with the arm extended?
No, this one that's on the screen now that has that's the arm extended, and then there's the next one. This is a really stupid way to show this now that I'm realizing it, that I can't stop it. But
okay.
This one that's coming up here, this one here. I'm trying to show him entering the light, the bird in the light, and the woman encased in shadow. That's kind of a common theme in the book, is that that she is always surrounded by shadow and sharp, jagged rocks, and he is always surrounded by life. So he's surrounded by light, and he's always surrounded by the growth. So you'll see barnacles, and you'll see leaves, and you'll see ferns.
Got it.
Whereas she's surrounded by cliffs and shadows. And so this one I like because it almost feels like those worlds are colliding, because what's happening is he's leaving, he's made friends with this bird, he's leaving to go sell, to go sell his wares at the local market for a few days, and he's leaving the bird in her care, and she hates the bird. And so there's kind of this conflict, this yin yang, and I like kind of the sharp juxtaposition that's going on there, where the light is kind of stabbing her and her shadows are kind of cutting into his world a little bit. Because everything up until this point has been very... I'm talking way too much about this, but everything up until this point has been, they're in the same scene, but they're always very separated. They live in different worlds. Like even to the point where I've got him, I don't have it out, but I've got him in the opening scene. There's a Shinto shrine, which is a sacred designation in the Shinto religion, and he's a woodcutter and a fisherman, and so he has kind of a makeshift. It's not really a Shinto shrine; it's kind of like his version of it, kind of end capping both ends of his pier to try to denote that this is sacred space for him. And then she's over in the rocks, like surrounded by shadows and jaggy stuff. And so they're always near each other, but totally separated. And so this is the first time where you see those things start to mix. So I like the idea of that composition. It's not quite there just yet, though.
It's weird. The one you were saying you're leaning towards, which is it's kind of it's not the portrait. It's basically this one. Well, not this one. The next one.
Yeah.
It'll come up.
This one here.
So this one, I think, the one thing I would add to that is that arm.
Oh yeah.
That arm and the way you have the light extending to that arm on the, like her right arm. It's really nice. I would almost just grab that right arm and see what that looks like if you put it into the composition. Maybe that's crazy, but that's, to me, it's just like that. Anyhow, it's just something to consider, but I also don't want to delay you any longer on it, but I just can envision that arm being in there. And just
it's kind of a delay, but at the same time, like, it's a really, I don't know if I'm just making it too overly important, but it feels like a pretty significant story beat. And so I want to nail it because this foreshadows like a really pivotal moment. There's two main pivotal moments in this story. There's one where she snaps and cuts out this bird's tongue and basically almost kills it. And then the other one where she gets super greedy and opens up the box before she's supposed to and dies. And so that, for her story arc, this is foreshadowing something fairly significant, and so I want it to really land.
Yeah, so I mean that might work with that like ominous arm kind of framing where he is.
Yeah.
So him in the same position and just having that hand like lead in, I feel is just really strong. But I do like the Z, and but I think that'll bring. I think that's probably the one thing I like about the page with the arm is there's just so much movement with the character.
Yeah.
That's like the one thing, but it looks great. That's awesome. So you got a lot done. I would give you a hard time for not getting to the inks, but it's like you know what I mean. It's like looking at it. I can tell that you put in the work, and the thought to it. So that's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's been my struggle on that one, but yeah, I'll continue to play with that. I still want to get it inked this weekend before we meet again. We'll talk about plans in a minute, but I think I can still get there because there's just giant spot blacks, and so once I nail the composition, that cart is going to take forever. But beyond that, there's just huge portions of blacks, and I might even cheat it. I like to actually do those by hand, but I might even cheat it and just X them out and then just do it in Photoshop just to keep pace, and then I'll fill it in later if I ever get a gallery exhibit or something.
That's cool. Yeah.
So
I it's funny because like for me, I I find that it takes me longer if I X out my blacks because I am not like as good at envisioning it
oh
until I actually see it. And once I lay down the blacks, like it helps me to kind of balance it. Whereas doing it as just X's, I might do too much or too little.
yeah
But I have like tons of friends who have it and they're able to do that. So it's I think it's just a give and take. But if you can do that, why not? You know.
yeah. I
And then
mean,
if you ever sell the original, you just fill your spot blacks. You know.
right. Yeah, and I mean I've got originals with X's on them. Not everybody
Oh yeah.
fills them in, so
Yeah.
but yeah. So anyway, so what are you planning on doing in the next 2 days or this weekend, I guess?
So I'm hoping by the next time we talk to have this page done. It may not be scanned, but I think I'd like it to be inked because the next two panels are fairly simple panels. And so I don't see a reason why not, you know.
Yeah.
And then like also knowing I'm not gonna have to like go in to my workplace on Saturday, it's like, okay, well maybe I can get a little carve away a little at this. So that's one goal. Um, I think that might be kind of the goal, and then just more progression with some premium stuff. But
Yeah.
that's pretty much, and we kind of discussed some of that before. So I'll share more if I can when I can.
Yeah. If and when we're allowed to talk about that, that could be really cool.
Yeah,
So
for sure. So
foreshadowing.
foreshadowing. Foreshadowing disappointment next week when I'm like, oh, I just wasted a bunch of time.
Yeah.
But I think that'll do it for me.
Yeah.
This only thing I've been struggling with, like for my own. I know we're going back with that, but
That's
like
fine.
my biggest struggle is kind of also one of the coolest things that's happened this week. And I can't get into too many of the details. We talked before about it, but it's like I had some challenges at my work, and my team and myself overcame them. And it's kind of like the coolest. Like those are the moments where I really like being an art director. There's times where being an art director is, you know, you're managing people, so it's like it's got all the frustrations of being a manager. But then there's those times when your team just like knocks it out of the park and does stuff beyond what you thought could be accomplished. And like in this case, kind of gave me back my weekend.
Right.
And so it's like it's just and I feel like I learned a lot through the experience and kind of grew from it. So like to me, the struggle this week was like hitting brick walls, and and oddly enough, like breaking through it. It's just giving me a lot of energy. Like tonight, I'm you know after this is done, I'm probably gonna ink a panel because I feel kind of pumped. And
Right.
then the conversation and these check-ins like renews my hope for that too. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and without getting into any details and just speaking generally, like leading teams is really an interesting thing because you don't necessarily get to produce as much as you would if you were in a different position, and so you almost take on like a situation where their failures are your failures and their successes are your successes, and it's really interesting that generally speaking, you can force a certain level of production out of people, you know, by being a jerk and driving everybody really hard and stuff like that. But you can't exceed that with that. But
yeah,
when the whole team decides to come together, and it has something to do with the leader, but it also has to do with just the team itself. You
yeah.
know, when as a unit everybody just decides, you can get 3 times that done, and it's amazing, and it feels good, and nobody's tired, and or
And
they
no
might
one's stressed when they're doing it. That was the beauty of it.
right.
It's like nobody's stressed out. People just stay cool headed. They're having fun. They're laughing. They're talking. And they're getting tons accomplished. And um, yeah, I mean, I think that's the big struggle. Is like it's very rewarding being a leader in a department or a leader at in any context. I think that it's very similar to like being a parent.
Yeah.
Where it's like a lot of the times it's kind of a thankless job, but there's times where like, you know, just you get these almost highs that you wouldn't really get in any other context. And
Yeah.
so that's really cool. And like I've also made a note to really, I think whenever you get into that kind of thing, like a leadership position and you've been in it, are in one, you know, um, and like one thing that I think was told to me by one of the previous managers that I worked with when they were giving me tips, you know, kind of mentoring me a little bit. They said basically just like celebrate every little victory because they're few and far between,
Right.
and great things are accomplished like a small thing at a time.
Yeah, because the
Usually,
majority
yeah,
of your job is just standing in front of your team and taking every arrow from every customer, every salesperson, and everybody else in the C-suite and everybody like in the ops and everybody. You receive every wound so that they can keep working.
yeah,
And then sometimes behind you where you're taking all these arrows in the chest, they're like, oh, that dude. And you're like, seriously, guys, come on. Like you're not getting any of this because I'm taking the brunt of it so that you don't have
yeah,
to. Can you just like back me up a little bit? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, when they
You
do,
gotta enjoy the days when they do.
it's like the best because then
Yeah,
everybody's doing well and and whatever. But like that was always the hardest thing about leadership for me was like I would go to bat and I would battle with the rest of the company to protect. I kind of imagined myself as this like protective shield
yeah. You're a
in
firewall.
right in this very analytical, operationally minded situation. I try to grow this tiny little garden of creativity, and you just spend like 95% of your time making sure that nobody else is allowed in there or can kill it or can do anything, and and then every once in a while, that inside of your bubble there's a problem. You're like, dude, you guys, come on, please, like you don't even know what is happening outside of this right now.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah, I mean, you learn a lot. I mean,
yeah,
like to me, I've learned a lot about positive thinking and positivity, which I always thought was kind of loaded and fake.
right,
Um, as a young designer and illustrator, I just always thought like, well, that's just fake. It's unreal, that kind of thing. And just being in the position of management, you see how like toxic like negative thinking is, and
right,
you see it spread through a team. And you can also learn a lot about like one of my biggest things is just like not making assumptions. That's like a huge thing
yeah,
because I've noticed that like 80% of the problems that arrive in a workplace, any workplace, are just making assumptions about another person.
yep,
Whether it's an assumption about what their intentions are or an assumption about what their meaning is without checking with them what they meant.
right,
Um, and so that leads to like errors in art. It leads to like errors in judgment regarding other people. It's crazy. But what's interesting is, well, you also realize that about assumptions about managers, because once you're in a management position, things that when I was like a designer or an illustrator on staff, that I would look at and be like, what's with that? Like, you know,
yeah,
and I would kind of be very critical of. I didn't realize, like, meanwhile, while I was complaining about my slow computer, they're advocating for it, and it's going to take like
right,
5 months for them to get that through finance and get it
right,
in,
yeah,
you know? And so it's like things like that where it's like the unobserved stuff that you, if you're being responsible as a manager, shouldn't share too much of
right,
because you also have to protect the other department's reputation
mm-hmm,
and the other management. And so it's like you're kind of it's a very fascinating thing, and it's still new to me. I still like it because I have no idea what I'm doing still,
yeah. I
but I'm
came
getting better at it.
I came in I came in really begrudging the CFO because I looked at this individual, and this has happened in multiple companies that I've kind of been either director of sales and marketing or director of marketing or art director or whatever, like in some sort of where I'm in the inside of those kind of executive meetings. um, I always looked at the person with the purse strings as just stingy that didn't want to spend any money. And then in the company that I don't want to give too many details, but in a company I was working for, I really came to respect these two people that worked in that position that I had previously just assumed, like, why is it that it's totally like Scrooges that end up there and they like never want to do anything creative or fun and they're always just complaining. And then I realized, like, as I started having, because I was given a little bit more authority, and so I started having to like spend a ton of time in Excel, like justifying the expenses of things and whatever. And like I would sit down with these guys and girls, and I remember this one woman who's just ridiculously intelligent, and she would just like take me through, and I learned to really appreciate and respect the value that she added. And then I started feeling so horrible because I knew that like there are 50 other people in the building that felt the way that I used to feel, and they will never understand because they're never going to sit down for 2 hours with her and go through a budget, and just be like, oh, so you're making it so that we don't just like close up shop and like hundreds of people are out of work. And so like,
that touches on what you're talking about. It's funny, we're going so long, but whatever, it's fun.
Yeah, whatever.
So that touches on a huge thing that I feel like was a huge advantage of me coming into where I work now, which is I ran my own business for 15 years,
right?
About that much. And so coming from that, where you have to write off every expense, where like my computer breaks down, I pay for it. Like,
right.
Like if something's shoddy and that's all I can get at this point, that's what I use, and coming from that perspective into the workforce was like this mystical, weird, surreal thing, because it had been a long time since I was like in-house, like working for the man or whatever.
Right.
And my perspective on that, like budget-wise, is strangely one of my strengths. Yeah. I'm not great at it, but I'm not where I was when I was like fresh out of college. When I was first out of college and I had my first creative jobs, I was very critical of that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like when you run it yourself and then you're put in a position where it's like you need resources and they're provided within like a couple weeks or a couple months, that's not that bad.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to like your own business where it's like, well, I need a computer, so I'm going to have to save for a couple of years,
Right.
Or oh, well, too bad, I'm just going to have to make it work, or
right.
It's so it's kind of neat because it does take away a mask of that. So I'm very conscious of budget where I work, and I try to keep it low because I understand like if I pull from the budget, that's not just pulling from like my boss, but that's pulling from like the bonuses that my team might receive, like and stuff like that, because money isn't endless. It's not an endless resource. These are
right.
human beings running a thing. But it is interesting kind of seeing behind the veil, because like a lot of what I've experienced so far is just that like most people are really trying to do well by their staff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just a lot of what becomes chaotic is inevitable. Like you kind of have to butt heads to do business.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's like school too. You know this from college more than I do, but there's politics in college, and some of it's necessary politics, because it's like, hey, we have set amount for one department. There's 4 of you. Which one of you wants it?
Yeah.
And inevitably, if you're representing your department, let's say you're the chair, your department, all the department's chairs need more budget, need more resources. There's inevitably going to be a fight,
Yeah.
And the better leaders will do it ethically, but it's still inevitably, like when you're in a leadership position, you have to you're leading people, you're trying to get what your people need, and that inevitably bumps heads with other people who need what their people need if they're opposing things.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating.
And the best leaders will do what's best for the organization while still defending their individual area. And so that's where some super interesting power is such a weird word because it's got such a negative connotation, but power is just the ability to act, right? And so
Yeah.
if you look at it that way and you don't look at it like a conniving Machiavellian thing, real power comes from like honesty. And so if you listen to somebody else's pitch for that fixed amount of money, you know, and you're like, no, actually they need this more than I do, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
say that, all of a sudden when you come back and say, no, we really do need this, everybody in the room is going to be like, well, yeah, they must, you know. But if you're just always like, if everything is always the most important thing and you never give an inch and you never budge and you never take like a global view or a long-term view or a,
Yeah.
you know, like raise above your own department, then like you're just going to be that guy that, you know, everybody's like, oh yeah, he's just, you know, crying wolf again, you know, or whatever. But like
Exactly.
it's interesting to see when you get good leaders in an organization and they're all looking out for the greater good of the company and everybody in
Yeah.
it rather than my own little corner.
Yeah.
I remember having to teach salesmen. Like I had the salesman who sold something at a loss, like without getting it approved or anything, like, and it was a big order and we lost money on the order, and the particular organization that I was in at that time had access to the costs, the COGS, right? The cost of goods sold. And
Yeah.
so knowingly wrote the price for less than that. And like, we were like, hey, why did you do that? And they said, well, it's money in the door. We're like, no, it isn't. No, it is. Like, there's a check coming. Isn't that better than nothing? No, it's literally worse than nothing. Like, like, you know, like, so I was like, hold on.
The
And
only time
I went and wheeled a whiteboard over, and I'm like, let's talk about cash flow. We're just going to do a little mini economics lesson for a minute.
there is only one time in sales that you should ever take a loss, and that's with a loss leader, which
Right.
is like, you know, like that would be like you're selling printers and you're making your income on the cartridges.
Right.
You know, so you sell the printer at a loss, and or you know, if you're doing retail or whatever, you sell like a low cost item at a lower cost than it actually costs
Right.
to get the buyer in the door.
Yeah.
And then the buyer's in the door, and then you sell all your other items where you make, you know, you make back what you lost and plus way more. But yeah, that's ridiculous. I can't believe that. I would have I would have been furious.
But it was
Um,
but it was really interesting that I was the one that explained it, and that
yeah,
actually was the beginning of other people who held the purse strings,
yeah,
because people who had been in that position prior to me being there, I'm trying to be really vague. People who had been in that position prior to me being there had not behaved like that. They had
yeah,
kind of just like creativity for the sake of creativity. Let's all have fun and whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're going to go out of business that way. And so when I was like, no, this is how economics work, all of a
yeah.
sudden I think people started to take note, and they were like, oh wow, this guy like understands numbers. Like, and I'm not a good mathematician, but I understand like you should make money.
Yeah.
So, but it was
That's
it was an interesting switch. But yeah,
that to me, like that's what I was getting into with the whole like kind of feeling like I had a bit of an advantage coming in, because I think most of the art directors prior to me had been very much advocating for like all the resources their department needed
right,
without realizing what it costs. And it's like, you know, in my fantasy world, I would have everybody on the best computers and
right,
the best everything. In my reality world, I'd rather have everybody in the company get more money,
right,
like to take home.
yeah,
And so, like, anytime I make a budget decision for my department, I think, is this worth people getting $50 less next year?
right,
Is this worth people getting $100 less each year? You know,
yeah,
because each decision I make with that is going to have that kind of effect on the company. It's going to pull from the profit.
right,
And it's a write-off, but a write-off, if you run your own business, you know it's still an expense. You're just getting
right,
a write-off on the taxes on that expense.
yeah,
It's not like it's a free item. Um,
yeah.
and so,
I think people
you know,
completely misunderstand what a write-off is.
yeah, yeah. Oh
It
man,
just reduces your taxable income. You don't get that money back. It's not a
I got
refund.
and it's funny because I'm by no means like a financial guy, but the recent, like, I'll put in quotes, but the recent tax cut thing that went through has a really big negative side to it
Right.
for people who run their own businesses if they're literally a sole proprietor. And part of the problem is they've actually upped the cap for what you have to make to write off.
Right.
So basically, like, you have to expend a certain amount, and that's when you can write it off.
Yeah.
Whereas prior to that ceiling was a lot lower. So I was kind of explaining this to a guy who's like a very like kind of libertarian minded guy, which was a friend of mine, and they thought that when I was talking about contractors, I was talking about people who work on homes.
Oh no. Yeah.
And so it was like this weird thing where I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm a contractor. And they're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I'm not talking about a building contractor, just a
Right.
person who works as a sole proprietor by contract.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
that's it. And that's what the tax system views it as. Anyhow, it was funny because it was like, it was just one of those moments of like, I'm an artist, you're a financial dude, you should know this. I should,
Yeah.
like, you know. But yeah, anyhow, yeah, dude, this is too good of a conversation. I'm just in a chatty mood.
I don't know. My wife's out of town. I don't have anywhere to be. So, so hey, if you're in the chat still, I know Mike is in the chat. My
Yes.
phone just died. If anybody else is in the chat and you want to ask questions about finances, throw some questions in there. We'll see if we can field them. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, this whole topic, because the first time I took on like a major freelance gig, right? I've always done freelance on the side, and I've always made sure that, because there's always moonlighting contracts and things like that, I've always made sure that I'm in the clear with my day job and everything. But I remember the first time that I took a significant job, like it wasn't a couple $100, it was like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. How much I got taxed. I was amazed. Like, if you're not putting away a third of what you take in, you're going to be hosed during tax time. And it's like a third. A third is what you have to pay. And then on top of that, you have your own health care and your own expenses. Like, at work, I don't even pay a third. And then, like, they provide the equipment, and they provide the healthcare, and they provide retirement, and they provide whatever. They provide the building and the electricity and like the security and all that. And like, no, I've like carved out a piece of my house to be able to produce this, you know. Yeah. And then I was like, and on top of that, you're taking like almost half. It's like, it's ridiculous.
It was recommended, and I thought it was ridiculous. Like, my first year freelancing, and I was still in school at the time. I was like on my last year of my BFA, and I started just getting a bunch of freelance. And it wasn't an accident. It's like, I was weird. Like, I was a kid who had just made my portfolio, and I was doing stuff for fun outside of school that had more of a cohesive look to it. And I just started sending out cold emails and stuff. And at one point, it just started becoming like enough to where it was making what I would make. At the time, I was working like at an art store on campus.
Yeah.
And so it replaced that. And so I was freelancing, and that whole time I had a mentor who was one of my teachers, and ended up being a colleague too, because he actually helped me get my first teaching job, like after I'd been freelancing for a long time. Still a really great friend. But he was like saying, save 40% of what you make.
Right.
And he was like, not for savings, like for taxes.
Right.
He's like, because 40% will just about cover it and go a little over. And he's like, better to be over than under. Right. And that April.
Oh no, we lost Josh. Okay, let me do this real quick, and let's get Josh back. So Mike says, no questions from me, just listening and working. I have a lot to learn about finances and moving forward, though. I think that's like a perpetual thing. I will say this, while I'm calling him back, I'm going to mute the desktop. But I will say this about freelance is I would always try and get a... Hey, you're back. And you're muted. 1 second. Okay. Now we can hear you. Let me see if we can see
can
you.
you do the screen thing? I can't see you on the screen.
Yeah. I just... Whenever that happens, I've got to like set everything up again. And there we go. Okay. So you're back. But one thing that I would definitely recommend, I was like filling dead air time. So I'm just wrapping that up. One thing I would definitely recommend if you are doing any type of work on the side or freelance work or whatever, get a CPA. Pay a CPA.
Yes.
And it's usually a couple $100. I pay like $300. Sometimes you pay $500. Sometimes it's not even that much. But if you do that, they will save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, there's just so much to the tax code that you could learn it if you want to, but there's no need because there are people out there that do that for you. And in the grand scheme of things, I will pay someone $300 to save $10,000. Like I will. Yes. That's like a no-brainer. And that's the type of like, it's not always that. But that's the type of thing that you'll get when you have like a CPA on your side. Yeah.
Now,
go ahead.
I don't. I'm actually naive about it. Like, by CPA, you mean just an accountant who does your taxes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know like what CPA stands for.
So there's accountants, and then there are people who can do taxes, and then there is a higher level that is a combination of both of those. That's a certified public accountant. And it's kind of like achieving the bar for lawyers. It's like an actual, like, you have to take a test and you have to go through the steps and whatever. And so like a certified CPA is different than just somebody who's good at books or like the guys who are in the little pop-up shops that have like the dancing costumed sign holders outside, like an actual CPA.
So my guy is a CPA. I just I guess I just wasn't familiar with the acronym, but he like was recommended by 2 other freelancers, and because he's done a lot of freelance illustrators and freelance graphic designers taxes, he knows all the write-offs. He knows all the proper ways to kind of file, how to, like, whether it's worthwhile to, get an LLC, which for me wasn't really worth it. Yeah. And also I like him because my first year with him, I was like, I got him. So tell me how I'm going to cheat the code and make money. And he was like the guy who's like, no, you are going to cross your I's and dot your T's and pay every dollar you owe because you don't want to get audited.
Right.
And he's like, and I don't want you to get audited. So that's my job. And he's like, I'm going to do this as ethically as possible. There's no cheating. And it's going to be all above board. And I was like, aw. Like, at the time, keep in mind I'm like 20-something, kid who's like, I just want to keep as much as I can. But honestly, thankfully, because of that, I've never had an audit.
Yeah.
And I've always been able to make my taxes. He always provides me with a really good estimate for the next year or two, which I never pay my estimates, so I always pay the penalty at the end of the year, which is a dumb thing. But, pay your estimates. You'll save I think it's like $80 or something. It's not a huge fine, and most freelancers, from what I hear, kind of don't do their estimates. Because it's rough, especially if you're freelancing, because what you're estimating on might be a feast year, and then you have a famine year, so it's like you might be paying out 50 times more than you need to.
Yeah, well, and there's the whole long game thing where there's this rolling 5-year period. So each new year pushes the the 5th year off, right? And so there's this rolling 5-year period, and everything that you do is taken into account during that 5 years. And so there are things where having a CPA where I've sent them a text and I'm like, hey, it's the end of the year. I need to upgrade my computer, or I need to buy this camera, or I need to, whatever. There's an expenditure. And he'll push back and question me, is this a legitimate thing, or are you just like finding stuff to write off? And I'll tell him like, this is why I feel like this is a write off, and he'll be like, okay, it is. But the interesting thing is he'll say, you need to buy that in January, or you need to buy that before December 31st, based on this 5-year rolling calendar,
Nice.
to maximize, because there are certain times where, like right now when I got this job, it was a little bit, well, it was less than what I was making, and then I got into the tenure track, and now it's a little bit more than what I was making. I got into the worst position that you can be in, where I'm at the bottom of the next tax bracket.
Yep.
And so I'm paying like rich dude taxes, and I'm not making rich dude money. And like, but there's interesting stuff in there, because you're like, because if you can get just below and be at the top of the one that you're underneath, then you pay significantly less. But then there's not a lot of gains to be had beyond that. And so pushing some things off, and it's legitimate. You're not gaming the system, but I actually would really spend money at different times. Right. And
it's
so
not gaming the system, it's just budgeting for the year.
Right. And, and having a fiscal year and having somebody say, this is the smart time to buy this.
Yeah, another reason it's helpful too is like if you get in the point, like when you're first getting into like freelance, especially if you're doing freelance, and actually there's something that comes up about freelance since we're going long. But so one thing that's really important for the CPA aspect too is the fact that like there are some times where like when you're first starting out, you're just going to take whatever you can get.
Yeah.
And that's going to be how you build your base and stuff like that. But there are actually some times where taking a freelance job might actually cost you more money at the end of the year because it ups you and puts you into a different bracket.
Yep.
Than it would to not take the job. So that's good to know, and it's good to have somebody to call where you can say like, hey, I got offered this. It's going to put my income up to this much at the end of the year. Should I take it? Because there are some times where it might actually be a disadvantage to take a big job that's going to put you into a different bracket. Right. So,
and that's when you just do like net 90 invoicing.
Exactly. So there's that. But what I was realizing too, and maybe we might need to start wrapping up soon, but Mike said no questions. He's listening and learning. Has a lot to learn about finances moving forward, though. And get an accountant, dude. Yeah. So the thing that I realized, and this was something I realized when I was talking to my team, because we all kind of freelance. Like pretty much every designer I know will take a freelance gig here or there.
Right.
Just especially if money's tight for that month, it's like, okay, I'm gonna search out and get a couple freelance gigs to cover this loss, or whatever. It just dawned on me like this year how awesome and cool it is to be a graphic designer or an illustrator. It's one of the few jobs where you can have an in-house job and your skill set can make you money outside of your workplace fairly easily.
Right.
And it's a sought-after skill set. So it's almost like if you worked for a plumbing company and you have that skill of plumbing, then you can kind of do plumbing for Bob down the street or whatever, and maybe do it at a different rate, but you can make some extra income. And I was realizing like that's one of the coolest things about being an illustrator or a designer is like I have a day job and I can also make more money. I'm not pinched. I don't have to take like a second full-time job. I can literally just take like an illustration or two. Yeah. And that's a really cool thing, and it's a unique thing. Yeah. And it's specific to like skill-based jobs.
But in your plumbing example, most of the time that would be contractually unethical, if not illegal, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, that's
because you're doing the exact work that you're doing, whereas visual communication tends to be niche, right? And so, I worked in the music industry, and you're working in kind of, I don't know what you'd call that, promo area. And
It's
so,
promotions and souvenirs.
right. And so if like a huge Fortune 500 company were to approach you and ask you to do promotions and souvenirs, you would turn that down because
Of course.
you'd be shooting yourself in the foot.
Oh
You would
yeah,
funnel them through the door of your company, like that
yeah.
you
You
work for.
don't. Yeah. That's actually a really good thing to mention. Like, keep in mind if you are doing that, you never work for a competitor in your industry. Like,
Right.
if you're in house at a place, you never work for a competitor.
Yeah, and you never take
Um,
a client. Like you never steal a client from work or divert a
no,
client that
no.
would have been a client for work.
But
But the cool
if
thing
I
with
get off work and somebody from my previous business like contacts me that has nothing to do with what I do now, I can take it. And keep in mind, like obviously, if you're a designer or an illustrator, obviously check the manual or worker's manual and like what you signed when you got in there.
yeah,
But I know for me, I do have that freedom. And once again, I don't even know if the competitor clause is in it. I just know I wouldn't even have to look. Like
right.
that's just not something.
No,
That's just not cool to
yeah,
do.
it's a smart thing to do. To you don't piss in the well where you drink your water. Like
Hmm.
it's not. But yeah, but say somebody like Kevin Cross or somebody, if he's working in house for somebody, and then somebody says, hey, we want you to do this album cover, like those are related skills but completely unrelated industries, and so he can
Exactly.
do that all day long. Whereas a plumber, it's like everybody's toilet. There's not a different industry of toilet or a different
That's
industry
true.
of sink. You know what I mean? There's just
That's true.
plumbing, and so it is a really interesting, really cool niche that you can get into where, as long as you're not stepping on the toes of your employer, you can use those skills in different non-competitive areas and make all the money that you're willing to sacrifice your free time for.
For
So
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is kind of
I
cool.
love it. I love it, and I think it's interesting because it's easy to get bogged down in the like kind of day to day when you're doing art or even making your own creative projects. Like there's times where you can like almost forget how cool it is what we're doing.
Right.
Um, but it's like I have been having a lot more moments like that in this last year where I've been at work and I'm like, gosh, this I'll start feeling stressed or something, and then I'm like realizing, wait a minute, I'm like drawing
Right.
and I'm on the clock.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, other people are having to deal with cold calls from customers and all
Right.
this like other stuff, and I'm just drawing,
Yeah.
like, and making stuff. That's awesome. It's a really cool thing that we're doing and that we're pursuing doing,
Yeah.
and it's kind of neat to remember that. Like, and it's important to remember that because if you don't, there's a million kids straight out of school that have that fire.
Yeah.
And they remember it because they feel it. They're like, I just want to get to that point of like
Yeah.
being on the clock and doing this.
Yeah.
So yeah. All
No,
right.
that's
Well,
cool.
I think we had a really good one, even though it was much longer than 15.
That's
But
good.
I think it's good. We'll
Let
do this more often. Like every once in a while, have like a longer, extended one. What
yeah.
did Mike just say? He
Mike
said
Mike has
there must.
an accountant in the family, and he's had
Nice.
those situations in the past where he's had to buy bigger work items at a later date, etc. And so
Yeah.
he's got like a built-in accountant, which is even better
That's
sometimes.
that is ideal. And in fact, if you can have an accountant in the family who'll hook you up, like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and they tend to take your call more frequently and quicker than other people.
Oh yeah.
So hey,
True.
let's do, instead of doing a 2 minute, let's do like a 20 to 30 second plans for the weekend segment, and then we can wrap it up. Just because if I don't, I won't have any plans, and then on Monday I will not have done anything.
Okay.
Okay.
So okay.
Okay. So my plan is, um, I am going to my wife is out of town, but my daughter is back, and so I'm single parent for the weekend. So I want to spend some quality time with my daughter before there's an additional family member, and she starts to feel ignored. So we're going to kind of bank some of that time, but I'm also going to get try to ink this entire spread Some of which the spotting of the blacks I think I'm going to do digitally. So before Monday, quality family time and inked those 2 pages.
Sounds good. All right. And I think I might have already said this, but yeah, I'm going to finish my page, and
Right.
and then quality family time is also a good mix, and working out, which
Yes, I did. I did this week. I didn't do it Thursday, but I ran a little over a mile and almost wanted to die. That was sad. I got about a block away from my house and started to feel chest pains, and it's good that I'm working out because I'm not going to make it to 50 if I don't. And then I've done a couple sessions on the rowing machine, and so I'm feeling good. I missed yesterday, but my goal is 5 days a week, so I can hit that if I go tomorrow, which is my plan.
nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm going to have to either make up for tonight tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I don't do morning workouts. Like there's a lot of people who really like it.
Right.
I like to do it when I get home, or like when it's getting towards the end of the day and I'm starting to feel that like decline,
Right.
where I'm like, I just want to go to sleep. For me, that's the ideal time, because then when I'm done, I have this like extra little burst of energy that kind of will get me through to get more art done and stuff.
Yeah. I should have done that yesterday because what I actually did is accidentally fell asleep. And then I woke up later. I was like, had I just done 20 minutes on the rowing machine or something, I would have been awake.
But then again, dude, there's value to sleep.
There is.
But yeah, so next time do better. And then next time I will too. So hopefully the next time we talk, I haven't skipped a day by then.
Okay.
So sounds good. I think we got a plan. We got a game plan. We got 2 crews of people who joined in on the 48-hour thing, and they're doing their own brand of it, but they're doing an art check. And I cannot say enough how awesome it is to do, just to kind of keep that juice and that fire, especially if you're working on like comics or animation or books where it's a long game. It's easy to lose your sight of like the forest for the trees,
Yeah.
And so like this really helps kind of keep me on point with like the greater goal, which we'll have to have a longer, maybe the next time we do a long episode, we should do like a long view of our overall goal and see where we're progressing there.
Yeah. For me, that will be very helpful because I will finish the inking soon, and beyond that is totally uncharted territory. And so that'll be really helpful to kind of do a big planning thing, and how am I going to get this published, and what convention should I start looking at, and kind of like what are my plans like in a promotion standpoint, because I've never done any of that. And we can grab some of the guys in the community here that have done Kickstarters and have done printing, and there's a wealth of resources that I think we could tap into selfishly to help me with my project, and then maybe other people could learn stuff too.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
All right. Okay, so if you would like to take a look at Josh's stuff, then check out quarterlystories.com. You can see the pages that he has finished, and within the next little while, you'll see the page that he's currently working on up there as well, so you can check back there often. If you want to see my stuff, then you can go to corykerr.com. We are both also on Instagram and Twitter, and especially on YouTube. And so if you haven't subscribed to both of us, subscribe. And if you want to make sure that you jump in like Mike did today, hit that bell so that when we go live, you will get a notification as well. And then a special thanks to No Saboteurs for licensing the intro music. And we will catch you guys on Monday. We are out.
Bye.